Okay, I think we will kick off today's Northern Institute People, Policy and Place seminar. Thank you so much for coming along. A warm winter's welcome to you all, although if you're in Darwin, that probably doesn't apply. My name is Andrew Taylor. For those that you don't know me, I am a demographer at the Northern Institute of Charles Darwin University, and it's a great pleasure to be hosting the seminar today along with my co-hosts, colleagues from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, who I'll introduce properly in a minute. Can I just get an indication that you can all hear me out there in the Netherlands? Just a couple of people in the chat maybe letting me know if you can hear me before I go on any further. Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. So before I introduce my colleagues for today's seminar, I'd like to, if I can get the page moving, I'd like to take this time to acknowledge the First Nations people of Australia right across the lands of Australia on which we live and work, and I would like to pay my respects and our respects to elders past and present. So in today's seminar, as well as myself, we have Natalie Russell from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, who I'll refer to them as the ABS from now on to stop myself getting tongue-tied. They will present first on and give you all the key information on the how and the why of the census, with a focus on the NT to some degree. Natalie's colleague Tanya Hornick will be on hand behind the scenes to assist with questions later if needed. And while we're on questions, please add them to the Q&A section of the Teams webinar and not the chat. And we'll address the questions at the end of the session after both presentations. After Natalie, I'll be presenting my stuff around why I see the census as being so important as a demographer and a population researcher to not only research, but to individuals, families and communities as a whole. So what I'll do now, without further ado, is to introduce Natalie Russell, who is the Northern Territory Operations Lead for Inclusive Strategies and Engagement for the 2026 census. Natalie brings together 2 decades of public sector work experience in community programs and cultural navigation. Her work spans remote and urban regions, particularly in the Northern Territory. And this is complemented by a personal passion for local history and reading physical books. Yay. And Tanya, behind the scenes there, is Director of Inclusive Strategies and Engagement for the Census of Population and Housing with the ABS. So it's with great pleasure now that we're going to switch screens to Natalie's presentation on the census. Thank you very much.
For me, I suppose the first thing to do. Thank you so much for that, Andrew. Yes, and I am a very big bookworm, so when I'm traveling, I'm trying to weigh up how many books I can take, especially with the weight restrictions. So just to talk about the census. So what is a census? Every 5 years, the Australian Bureau of Statistics counts every person and home in Australia. We call this the census population and housing. The census is often described as Australia's largest peacetime activity, and it is certainly the largest and one of the most important statistics collections undertaken by the ABS. It takes many years of planning. It gives us a snapshot of who we are and helps us plan for the future. The census forms ask questions of things about your age, country of birth, your religion, ancestry, language used at home, work, and your education. Census data provides information on the number and key characteristics of people in Australia. Only a census can provide this information for the whole country. Now, this includes providing this data for small geographical areas and small population groups, such as people experiencing homelessness. The census is compulsory for everyone in Australia, except foreign diplomats and their families. And this includes international students, temporary workers and tourists, visa holders and newborn babies. So the next census will be held on the 11th of August 2026, and it'll be Australia's 19th census. Next page, Andrew. Sorry, I should have been telling you. All right. So the value of the census. So census data is used for lots of things, big and small, from planning schools and healthcare to local services for individual, families and communities. Census data underpins Australia's official population statistics, which informs decisions on electoral boundaries and underpins funding to states, territories and local governments. It also informs government decisions, spending, planning and service delivery in areas such as education, health and transport. So the census doesn't just provide demographic counts of the population, it is a rich point in time snapshot of Australia. It provides a picture of the cultural diversity of Australia. Only a census can provide this information for the entire country, including providing this data for small geographical areas, small population groups, such as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people experiencing homelessness, people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and it provides data on important topics such as housing, including rents, mortgages, incomes, religion, language use, and much more. Next page, please, Andrew. Oh, no, sorry, stay on that page. Still got a little bit more to go on this one. So ensuring everyone participates in the census means high quality census data to inform these important decisions. An independent report by the Lateral Economics found benefits of census sustainably outweigh its costs. It found that for every $1 invested in the census, $6 of value was generated to the Australian economy. This report values the Australian census. It concludes that the census data plays a critical role in providing Australia's economic and social infrastructure. That's the importance of it. So data collection, next page please, Andrew. The data collection in the census helps community organisations, business and governments make informed decisions. Census data is used to plan and deliver a variety of services across Australia. So example includes the Healthy Deadly Kids and the Torres Strait Islander Media Association, who use data to help them provide services and information to their communities, particularly with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and communities. Another example is the Playgroup Australia, who uses census data to understand changing community needs and ensure its playgroups remain relevant, flexibility and accessibility for families. Census data helps plan when and where playgroups are offered, including more weekend and after hours sessions. So it's another one, Safe Work Australia uses census data to help communicate safety information effectively. The census provides Safe Work Australia with a deeper understanding of Australia's changing workforce. So this matters most when supporting multicultural communities where language, migration history and education levels can all affect how safety importance is received. Next page, please, Andrew. So protecting privacy is our highest priority. The information people provide is confidential. The ABS is legally required to keep data secure and not release information in a way that it is likely to identify an individual. All personal data is protected by the Privacy Act 1988 and the secrecy provisions of the Census Statistics Act 1905. This means that our staff are legally required to protect this information, and staff working on all stages of the census are covered by these laws. It's against the law for any past or present staff members to share in any way information collected under the Act. This includes with anybody, including other government agencies like the police, ATO, Centrelink or housing officers. We work closely with security experts who provide independent testing and reviews on our security measures. The census online form is built and secured in accordance with the security requirements specified by the Australian Cyber Security Centre. We have a range of processes that make sure information on census forms stay confidential. We use the strongest encryption technology available to make sure that information from the online census form is secure. Security testing is done at every stage of development and development to ensure best practices are followed. More information about how we protect people's privacy is available on the ABS website. Next page, please, Andrew. So the ways to participate is households can complete census in their preferred way, online, by paper, or with help from us. From late July 2026, households will receive instructions on how to complete the census. Households can complete the census as soon as they receive the instructions if they know who will be home on census night. Some people living in remote areas and people living homelessness will have help to complete their census form from one of our census staff. If you or someone in your household would like to complete a separate form for privacy reasons, you can get a census number to complete online or request a paper form by calling the Census Contact Centre. Next page, please, Andrew. So we are preparing to collect data from more than 10 million households. With the diversity of Australia geographically and population, we'll use a number of methods. So how we'll reach out to all of Australia? Well, we have a few main ways to enable everybody across the country to be counted. The mail out, almost 90% of households will receive a letter with instructions on how to complete the census online or request a paper form. Most people will complete the census this way. The mail out area includes known addresses identified using the ABS address registry. Each letter received has a unique logon code which correspondents could use to access online forms, as well as information on how to request a paper form. For the Northern Territory, this will be for Darwin, Palmerston, and Alice Springs town, and you can see the screen represented in the bright purple. I was just checking that. I need to probably zoom up on that. But so drop off, just over 10% of households will get a visit from one of our awesome field staff. He'll drop off a paper form, and the drop off areas are mostly rural areas. So those include the small towns without street mail service delivery, making up 11.1% of the household. So the census field staff deliver paper forms to dwelling in these areas, and this includes areas around Katherine, Darwin, and Alice Springs. So paper forms also includes a unique login code, and these enables the households to complete the form online. So if you look at the map blue, so the remote areas represent around 4% of all private dwellings, yet make up close of half of the Australians' total landmass. However, this is a bulk of the landmass of the Northern Territory, including Aboriginal communities. And respondents participating in many remote areas are visited by field staff and offered the opportunity to complete the census through an interview to self-respond if they prefer. And that's in the yellow area. All right. We can go to the next page, Andrew. So making sure everyone is counted, it asks questions about age, country of birth, ancestry, language spoken at home, work and education. A critical part of the census is to make sure anyone who is in Australia on census night is counted. For the 2026 census, we have designed inclusive strategies for groups that face barriers, challenges, or obstacles taking part in the census, including people from the culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, people living with disability, people experiencing homelessness, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So these strategies provide support pathways for people to participate in the census. Next page, please, Andrew. So the people, supporting people to participate, we will be employing about 30,000 field staff around the country. Our field staff will continue to play an important role by delivering and collecting census material to those who need it and reminding people to complete their forms. Wherever possible, field staff will reflect the communities they serve, with a particular emphasis on recruiting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander field staff, people from culturally, linguistically diverse backgrounds, and those who have lived an experience of homelessness. So we are still in the recruitment phase. So there are a range of ways that people can help to participate in the census. The Census website is a source of trusted information on how to participate, where to get help, and the value of census. And this includes a chat box called Claire, who can answer some questions about the census. People who can call the Census Contact Centre or access TIS and NRS for those who need help. So pop-up hubs will provide in-person support for people within the community locations. Of the pop-up hubs will be also published on the Census website. We have already advertised pop-up hubs for Darwin, Katherine and Alice Springs on the Census website, and we will be scheduling more across the Northern Territory. Information will be published in accessibly formats, including Auslan videos, Census household form in Braille and large print, and audio questions and translated information. And like in the 2021 census, people will be given more time to complete the census. This means that they can complete the form when it is more convenient for them over a number of weeks and not just on census night. You can move over to the next screen, Andrew. So away from home on census night? Yep, that's it. Everyone in Australia must complete their census, even if you are away from home or an international visitor. So this includes visa holders, tourists, and international students studying at Australian University. So the international visitors, it is important that all visitors to Australia complete the form on census night, regardless of how long they intend to stay. A form will be provided by your accommodation provider or the home you are staying at. Alternative, you can also complete your census online. For people that's travelling on census night, note that this might include people who are not staying in formal accommodation. Census night, note that this might include people who are not staying in formal accommodation. This includes people that are parked on the side of the road for free camping in a tent, like free travellers, or those who are actively moving from one place to another over census night and don't arrive at their destination until after 4 p.m. on August the 12th. They could be catching a bus or a train. So it is important that people complete their census forms with the address of where they stayed on census night, which is Tuesday the 11th of August, even if they were travelling or in transit. People should provide as much information as possible to answer the questions of where they were staying on census night. That might include the name of a rest stop, the highway they were travelling on, or latitude and longitude of coordinates. It is also important that census know how many people were in transit on census night. So when completing their forms online, people will be prompted to include any additional information, and they should type the word traveller in this box if they are free camping on census night. So support to complete the census is available online, over the phone, or a pop-up hub location around Australia. So for all the people free camping on census night, a census form and instructions will be provided at pre-identified rest stops and rest truck stops and visitor information centres. Staff can advertise of these locations. For those actively travelling overnight until 4 a.m. on August the 12th, i.e. the bus or trains, they should complete an online census form. Hotels and motels and caravan parks, a census form and instructions will be provided to all the people staying at the temporary accommodation, such as hotels, motels and caravan parks on census night by the accommodation provider. It is important that you complete your census form with the address of where you stayed on census night on Tuesday, the 11th of August 2020. If you need any assistance, please speak to your accommodation provider. Similarly, people staying in hospitals or care facilities, they will be provided with a personal form by their facility if they are staying overnight on census night. If you know you'll be away on census night, you can report that you'll be away on census night on the census website. Okay, go to the next page. Yep. So when will the data be released? So we're often asked why it takes 10.5 months to release census data. So processing and dissemination of the census is a huge undertaking. Data is returned to us on paper forms well into November. We have to undertake a large but critical exercise to reconcile the forms with dwellings. This underpins the accurate count. We also have to code millions of text responses. The census data will be released in 3 phases. In June 2027, the key demographic, cultural diversity, health data will be released, as well as data from the new topics on sexual orientation and gender. And please remember, no names are provided or personal details. In October 2027, employment, educational qualifications, and internal migration data will be released. In the early to the mid 2028, complex data such as distance to work, social economic indexes for areas, SEIFA, accounted for people experiencing homelessness, will be released. So prior to that, the ABS will be releasing further information before the 2026 census takes place in August. The 2026 Census Products Release Guides will provide you with more details on the product changes and the variable that will be made available through them. The 2026 Census Dictionary will provide more detail on the variables and how they should be used. Next page, please, Andrew. So the next steps and timeframes. So we rely on broad network and partnerships, suppliers and stakeholders to ensure the success of the census, helping people participate, supporting inclusive strategies, promoting the census. This ensures that the census produces high quality and reliable data. Recruitment is a key part of this, and we are actually in recruitment now. We'll be seeking support with promoting the census with data collection in some cases, i.e. boarding school, hospitals, and to support strategies that ensures everyone is counted. We would need your support to ensure that the census is successful and data is represented. So census night is Tuesday the 11th of August. The 2026 census data release is coming from June 2027. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today. And if there's anything that has sparked your interest, feel free to get in contact. And you can do that through these channels. We greatly value the interest and commitment that you all have in census, and we want to thank you for the role that you've all played in to help the success. And I will hand it over to Andrew. So thank you so much for your time.
Right. Thank you very much, Natalie. Hopefully you can all see me as of now on your screens, and I think my slideshow should be coming. So taken from here, thank you very much for your presentation, Natalie. We'll go back to questions if there are any for you or Tanya later on. For now, let's switch to my presentation. Perfect. My apologies, everyone online. Okay, so in talking about the census, I'm going to start with my personal sort of history with the census because it's going to help situate my presentation and give you some context about why I'm so passionate about it and about the importance of the data that the census provides. So 6 censuses ago, a long time ago, back in the dark ages, I knocked on the door of the Australian Bureau of Statistics Darwin office as a fresh graduate out of UQ. And it was the start of my career, and the door opened, and it was definitely the dark ages because a big plume of cigarette smoke hit me smack bang between the eyes. And then to add insult to injury, my supervisor actually said to me, "You better go home, mate, because we don't wear ties and long sleeve shirts here." So that was an interesting introduction to the ABS. But putting that aside, one of my first jobs or roles as a graduate in the ABS way back when, was for the 1991 census, and I sat in a truck and accompanied 40,000 paper forms on their journey down from Darwin all the way down the highway to Alice Springs and dropping them off at communities all along the way. And this really taught me the logistical scale of the census, and the efforts put in by the ABS to make sure that nobody was missed. In that census, 91, I also did a collector role out in the streets of Darwin in the suburbs, getting chased around by three-legged dogs and abused by the occasional householder who thought I wanted to sell them a mop, or worse, that there was government coming to check on what they were growing in their shed. For the 96 census, I had a role promoting it around the territory. I got to go to every show in the territory and promote the census, and that was an absolutely fantastic experience. And then in between censuses, I managed the newly opened National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Statistics Unit, which came about from the Royal Commission in custody to deaths of Aboriginal people. And my sort of journey with the census continued. In 1996, I went off to the processing centre that Natalie mentioned, which was in an old wool store in Sydney, and that was fascinating, watching 10 million census forms or thereabouts get processed. And then after that, I worked for the ABS in the Sydney and Queensland offices, largely providing customers with census data and doing some other stuff there. So that's my long history with the census, and now I've been with Charles Darwin University for 21 years, and there's still not a day that goes by, or barely a day that goes by, where I'm not analysing or reporting on census data for one thing or another. So my view of the census is that it's both a mirror of society and a record of how we change over time. Through the questions it asks and the ways those questions evolve, the census reflects Australia as it becomes more diverse, informed and responsive to emerging social issues. It captures not only our population size, but our changing cultural identity, patterns of work, education and living arrangements, as well as national priorities as we change as a nation. An example of this evolution of the census over time is the addition for the first time in the 2021 census of a question about service in the Defence Force, the ADF. Respondents were asked, were they currently serving, had they previously served, or had they never served in the ADF, including whether that was in the reserves or the regular forces. And the new data provides an unprecedented picture of the size, characteristics and geographical distribution of Australia's veterans and defence communities. And the inclusion of this is just one example demonstrating the evolution of the census to reflect contemporary issues. So what we're going to do is actually have a look at some of that 2021 data very briefly, and this is the proportion of people across defence service categories from the 21 census who also have reported at least one long-term health condition. And when you look at that data, it becomes quite obvious that those who have previously served in the Defence Forces but no longer do have a far higher rate, especially in the NT at 42%, of having at least one long-term health condition, of which one is likely mental health conditions. So the addition of that census data provides an opportunity to drill down further into these issues and identify where these populations are concentrated geographically and the specific health conditions they are experiencing. This enables the development of targeted interventions and more specific service responses to mitigate health impacts and improve outcomes for communities, such as current and former ADF members. But an evolutionary census that's keeping pace with society is fine and good, but in mirroring Australia's history and societal norms and values, the census is also a documented record of injustices and prejudices. Excuse my tongue twister there. The obvious example is that it wasn't until the 1971 census, following a referendum in 1967, that our constitution permitted Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians to be included as part of our official population. To me, at least, this is a confronting part of our history that requires acknowledgement. But thankfully, the 1967 referendum And I want to stress that it was a constitutional issue, not an issue with the Australian Bureau of Statistics, by the way. But thankfully, the 67 referendum had the highest yes vote of all referendums in Australian history at 91%. And today, the ABS and others make extraordinary efforts to ensure the quality and coverage of First Australians and others in our communities is as high as possible, as Natalie has outlined. Nevertheless, the recency of the change in our constitution and in our census questions on who's included in our population and who isn't, just within my lifetime, evidences the institutionalised exclusion prior to that of First Nations Australians. And as I'll show you in the following slide, the past does matter, and in the case of population data about First Australians, the effects from the past reverberate even today in demographic data. So extending that out, moving forward and looking from the time 1971 when First Australians were first fully included in the census and in our official population counts, this is the trajectory of growth in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population for Australia. And you can see that it's a very high rate of growth. And indeed, the rate of growth shown here is above what we demographers call what is possible by natural increase, which is the excess of births over deaths. And the main driver of this growth has been what we're calling net identification change, which is the net effect of people changing their identification from non-Indigenous to Indigenous between censuses, and then offset by the smaller number of people who change from declaring themselves as Indigenous to being non-Indigenous in a subsequent census. But one thing you should note here, should be obvious, is that there is a reasonably large difference between the census count and the adjusted population estimates. And this reflects several factors, including census undercount, which we will return to shortly. So research around Australia suggests this pattern of very high growth reflects broader social and historical changes. In the past, experiences of suppression, discrimination, exclusion, and marginalisation meant that some people were reluctant to declare their Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander identity. But over time, developments such as the recognition of Indigenous land rights, the national apology to the stolen generations, and growing public appreciation of First Nations cultures, histories, and languages have led to improvements, and on top of that, improvements in census collection processes have created a supportive environment, or more supportive at least, for Indigenous identification. And so that's why we see more and more people on a net basis identifying as Indigenous over time. And this is a practical representation of those transitions in people's identities from one census to the next. And in this case, it's for Indigenous status. So the left side shows the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population in 2016, and the right side shows the end result of that population in 2021 as they transition. So as you can see, about 130,000 people went from identifying as non-Indigenous in 2016 census to being Indigenous in the 2021, and we call these the new identifiers. Far less, 45,000 went from identifying as Indigenous to non in 2021. So there was a gross identification change of about 85,000 people. So it's census data that enables us to unpack this major demographic shift in Australia's population, where we see a growth rate in our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population of about 5% per annum at the moment. So in this respect, while the census may in the past have been complicit in this outcome, it is also shedding light on this important and little understood population change. Moving on, Natalie's covered some of this, but the census is a vital baseline from which economic decisions are made. It provides consistent data over time at the 5-year interval, and from this we can develop trend information and trend data on core economic issues. So pretty self-evident. As well as economic issues, census data serves as the foundation for the development of planning, investment, and investments into social and other policies. And here are just a few examples of the application of census data across social and policy areas. And now I'm going to focus a little bit on the bottom one, which is about the census data's capacity and functionality for providing information on key trends over time. And what I'm going to do is focus on the Northern Territory and focus on trends that are significant, structural, and kind of inbuilt into our population at the moment. So we'll just look at a couple of examples. The major process that's been occurring in the NT population is that we have been and continue to urbanise at a fairly strong pace. So there's now 60% of our population, just above, lives in the Greater Darwin area, which is comprised of Darwin, these are local government areas, by the way, Darwin, Palmerston and Litchfield. The graph shows you that the bubble shows you the relative size of that LGA, and also on the vertical axis is the growth rate between 2016 and the 2021 census data. So again, this is census data. This urbanisation phenomenon raises questions. If you're an economist, you'll be thinking of some of them now. Are there going to be spillover effects from the large growth in the Greater Darwin area into our rural areas? On counter argument, will urbanisation leave our regions without the political and financial attention to stimulate population growth? Now, in the next slide, I'm going to show you 50 years worth of census data on the rate of urbanisation in each state and territory of Australia. Before I flip over, speaking of urbanisation, have a guess in your own, just to yourself, of which state or territory has the highest proportion of their population in their capital city. And the answer is Western Australia, closely followed by South Australia. So the whole of Australia is urbanising, not just the Northern Territory. But Census here is providing us with a really long-term view of how we're travelling as a nation in terms of our geographical spread. And what you can see is the Northern Territory is indeed rapidly urbanising, especially during the last two available census data periods. All right, mega trend number 2 that we'll look at today, ageing. Population ageing is not a new phenomenon to Australia, but it is a newer phenomenon to the Northern Territory. The jurisdiction is now ageing quite rapidly. And this chart shows you the different, the single year age population at 2021 in the grey shaded area compared to just 20 years earlier using 2001 census data. So you can see two main things happening, a large increase in the population age, sort of 55 and over, and even going right back to earlier ages. And then the population sort of under 20 not really growing, having grown in that 20-year period. So this is something that's built into our population and has all sorts of implications across health, well, right across the economy, and in our social settings as well. The last sort of mega trend I'm going to look at for the NT is our changing societal makeup. And we know that the Territory is a very multicultural place, but the makeup of our multicultural communities has changed a lot in recent decades. And the census is the vehicle by which we can really drill down into that and see things like the Filipino-born community now being the largest community in the NT, having taken over from the declining UK community, UK-born community in the Territory. But as well as mega trends, I'm just going to check my time here. Okay, we're broadly okay. The census can give us very detailed insights on micro trends, for lack of a better word, or events and outcomes at a micro scale. So here we see the resident population and age structure for the Peterman-Simpson LGA. Now the area that covers is shown on the map on the right-hand side of the slide. Now, this was the 2021 census. And of course, there was a COVID pandemic happening at that time. So while the NT was less affected in terms of population movement restrictions than other jurisdictions as a result of the pandemic, it nevertheless had a huge impact on tourism, of course, because people couldn't come from interstate. or it was very hard to do so. And consequently, pretty much the whole tourism workforce was missing in the 2021 census data from this LGA. So census for micro trends as well as mega trends. Census is also a very useful source for fact checking. Now, I don't want to necessarily pick on this one individual politician, but it's just an example of the census being used in that fact checking process. So the original claim was that there were 122,000 people sleeping rough in Australia, and that a certain proportion were women and a certain proportion of those were also children. You can see the census data was used in this case, it's the ABC fact-checking exercise. The source or the reference is there. You can see the data that was provided by the census to do the fact-checking, and with the end result being that this was the statements were wrong on all counts. Failed to fact check. So this was during debate. This came about during debate on the $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund in Parliament, which is now in place, of course. But so census can be used to, in many ways, and not least to be the source for fact checking. Or I mentioned earlier the nasty U word, which we'll take to mean undercount. Now, there has been a little bit of talk in the media lately about census undercount, but it is the case that censuses around the world miss some people and they do double count other people. So on a net basis, they do miss more than they double count, and the result is what we call net undercount. So to address this, and soon after the census is taken, the ABS is back out amongst our communities and doing what's called a post-enumeration survey. And from that sample survey, it can develop an estimate of the rate of undercount, or a net rate of undercount. Now, the NT has always had a higher rate of net undercount than elsewhere, and in 2021 that was 6% compared to 0.7% for the whole of Australia. Net undercount is positively correlated with remoteness, with the proportion of males in your population, the proportion of single people, the percentage of Indigenous people in your population, and a couple of other things. So where you have high rates for all of those variables, you're going to see higher rates of net undercount. And of course, with remoteness and the others, it's not too difficult to understand why that is the case. It's just more difficult to conduct a complete census. I'm just noting there, on Indigenous Australians, the national rate of net undercount was 17% in 2021. But don't panic. This all gets adjusted for in our official population estimates, which are adjusted up based at least in part on the net undercount rate. And so this is a lesson, if you don't already know, that if you're looking for population numbers of a particular place at a particular time, you should use what's called the estimated resident population. But if you're looking to really drill down into the characteristics of people who live somewhere, or the changing trends of our communities, you should use definitely census data, and I've shown you some of that already. So back briefly to the premise of my talk today, which is about the census enabling us to be seen, heard, and counted. And one reason that this is overtly important is that the groups within our community who might otherwise not be seen, heard, or counted in a literal and policy or service provision sense, and these are just some. And I'll just look at a couple now. So the exciting time ahead next week, in just a week's time, is that people in our LGBTQI+ communities can now fill out their gender identification on a non-binary basis. This is the first time, obviously, that this is possible. So this is a pretty exciting time for that community, who will now be, more visibly seen in the official data sets. And from this, we can, of course, develop research and identify service provision needs for communities such as our LGBTQI+ communities. And part of that community is same-sex couples. And this is a bit of work that I did and was presented in the media recently, looking at the top 10 local government areas in the whole of Australia for the proportion of all couples who were same-sex. And interestingly, inner Darwin City and Alice Springs were in that top 10. All of the rest were inner capital city areas. And of course, Alice was the only one in the top 10 that is remote. And it was the only one where female to female same-sex couples were more prominent. And you might have heard of Alice Springs having an unofficial label of the lesbian capital of Australia, but census data enables this sort of work to be done. As well as LGBTQI plus communities, homeless people can be seen in our census data, and Natalie's mentioned when this data will be released. You can see that rates of homelessness in the NT, especially in remote areas and areas with high Indigenous populations, are order of magnitude higher than across the NT as a whole, and for the rest of Australia, which is that blue vertical line there you see over to the left of the chart. And lastly, but definitely not least, of course, and given the size and scope of census data, it forms the backbone for research across almost every field in social and other sciences. And here's just one example of our research where we've integrated climate change projections data with census data and modelled the number of additionally hot days over 35 degrees and very hot days over 45 degrees that each settlement in Northern Australia can expect to have each year by the end of the century. The results are somewhat alarming, as I'll show you in a second, but they do emphasise the need for place-specific solutions to address each individual town's vulnerability to this increase in hot and very hot days. So here's a map of some of the results of that study. And we can see that by the end of the century, in the number of hot days over 35, there'll be a concentration in the northern coastal areas, while the increase in the number of very hot days, which is not shown on this particular map, over 45 degrees will occur in the desert regions. So again, combining census data with other data to draw inferences out on an important future issue for Australia. Sorry about that. So in summarising, the census enables us to see the size, characteristics and locations of the many groups that make up Australia. In doing so, it helps ensure people and communities are seen and their needs are heard and they are counted in the decisions that shape our future. So that is all from me. Thank you very much for coming along and for listening. What we're going to do now is take questions if there are any, and I'll moderate that, noting that if there are questions we can't answer right now, we will get back to you as soon as we can via email. See something in the chat. Okay, how closely does the ABS work with housing to measure overcrowding in remote communities and homelands? Natalie, did you want to, or Tanya, did you want to have a go at that one? I can answer from a data perspective.
I think there's different aspects to that question. So we will work with housing just to get the data of the number of dwellings, but in regarding to the people that are living in that particular dwelling, we will not seek housing's information. Our reasoning behind that is that we know that there's always overcrowding, and we do not want anybody not to participate in the census because they were concerned that housing was going to get that information. So I'm hoping that answers your question.
I could just add to that. The rates of homelessness that I showed earlier are calculated from using a particular method, using the household form or information about the household, the dwelling, that tells us how many people were living in that dwelling on census night. And we can then calculate from that whether overcrowding in that dwelling existed and the extent to which it existed, and the types of and the types of homelessness that were prevalent in that community or in that suburb or whatever geographical area. So the data on homelessness doesn't come from housing per se, but is calculated from the census data. Excellent. Well, I thought I was in the Q&A. Let me see. It's coming, it's coming. Oh, thanks for, okay, Samuel, hi. Thanks for a great presentation. I'm curious about the fine-grained detail of counting and data presentation in remote communities, e.g. Arnhem Land. As my mouse is on the wrong screen. Somebody might need to scroll down and, oh, there we go, I'm on now. Are homelands differentiated from towns, and is data then available through ABS? i.e. how many people are living at each homeland compared to towns? I can partly answer that. So yeah, so census data, as I've said, is available at a number of different geographical levels. In the capital cities, you can, because there's more people, you can get census data right down to a high-rise unit if it's large enough. You can get a certain amount of data about that. But out in remote areas, it depends more on the number of people that are within that area. But the ABS, so there's two aspects. The ABS, and you might want to speak on this a bit more, won't release any data that enables an individual to be identified. And there's methods they use to randomize the data to prevent that happening. And secondly, if data is too small for, say, a community or a homeland as a whole, so again, it'll depend on the size, then there'll be very limited data available to census data users like myself. So we might just get, say, the total population by sex, as opposed to, and of course, no individuals are identifiable there, as opposed to all the really fine level of detailed variables that some of which I've shown you today. So the answer to that question is kind of a mixed bag, but Natalie or Tanya, did you want to add to that?
I think, yeah, the homelands will be referred to as remote areas because they are always in remote areas, so they're not connected to towns. Yeah, so I think that probably answers your question as well, I'm hoping. That was how closely does ABS work with housing to measure overcrowding in remote communities and homelands? Oh, that is a good one. So look, ABS doesn't specifically work with housing on that. That's more about whichever service providers looking after those housing, because they're all different. They're not all with the housing. And in regarding to the overcrowding, with that data, with the RAMP team going out, that's the remote team, when they're going out and doing that count and supporting those people fill out those forms, that's when we can get the data to identify the overcrowding. So that would be included in the data. I'm hoping that's going to answer your question.
Another question,
Okay.
I wondered about the slide about increasing urbanization where Western Australia was at the top. I don't think that graph had the ACT on it. I wonder where the ACT would sit.
ACT would be 100% urban because ACT is ACT. Yeah, so I've excluded, you're right, Judith, thanks. I've excluded ACT from that chart for that reason. We have another one from Nilanjana. Hi, Nilanjana. Thanks for all the great information. I wanted to know, how can the Northern Territory census data be reported while protecting confidentiality, giving the small sample, or the small sample sizes? And how does the census classify respondents with overlapping roles? Are multiple roles recorded or only one? Natalie, I might hand that one to you.
Just trying to find that question.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
first one is,
I got it. No, I got it.
Yep.
All right. So how can the Northern Territory census data be reported while protecting confidentially, given the small sample sizes? So I suppose when you're talking about confidential, we don't share any people's details at all. So that's going to protect you. Even though some of the data might be small, it'll never be small enough where there's only one individual that can be pinpointed. So I think we could feel reassured that no one can be identified solely on their responses. the next one is, how does the census classify respondents with overlapping roles? Are multiple roles recorded or only one? I'm just trying to think what that kind of means.
So I'm taking it to mean job roles, occupations, maybe. And so the census asks people what their main occupation is. So in that sense, I don't think it reports on multiple occupations, but I'm aware the ABS conducts other surveys in which multiple sort of job occupations are reported, as far as I know.
And I would say this census and the data that we get from this census is solely on your what the answers that you put in your form. So we wouldn't go back and refer to any other previous surveys and you know, just check what you said the last time. That definitely is not the case. But if you're also talking about the different teams, because we've got the mainstream, and then we have the remote, and then we've got inclusive strategies. We work very closely with those teams to try and avoid any duplications, and we will do a duplication check anyway, a quality check on all those forms that come back. So I hope that answers your questions, Nilanya, trying to say that name correctly.
Nilanjana, yeah. Okay. Well, we're now 1 minute over time, so I'd like to thank very much my ABS colleagues for co-presenting at this seminar, and thank you to everyone that's come along. Andrew.taylor@cdu.edu.au for any further questions or comments, and I can pass those on to the ABS. There is something else coming. Oh, thanks. Okay. Thank you once again for attending, and have a great day. Enjoy Census Day next Wednesday. Get it right, Andrew. Okay.
All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.